Good morning, Alan. Today we're playing Forward to the Sky, but before we start, we have to play a different game. It's called Which One of These Buttons Starts the Game? At first I noticed the gears on the right, so I figured that must be an options screen. But then I noticed the book on the bottom, which is another symbol I've associated with option settings in the past. I decided to start with the gear, and sure enough, it's an option screen. And it even has the same IKEA manual philosophy as the title screen. Next, I tried the book. Ends up it's a storybook that details the events of the game. Judging from the empty sections, I assume these must fill out after each level. I was pretty close. We'll get to the caveat I missed later in this episode. Next, I tried the picture of a princess, which gave me a list of controls brought to you again by IKEA. Button, swing, sword. Got it. The only option left is the balloon, which, ta-da, is actually our level select screen. So I select stage 1, and then, I get the story I just read. Again, that one. This is going to be a theme with Forward to the Sky. It really counts on you being heavily invested in this story. It's only fair then, I suppose, to begin by outlining the gripping narrative tale of Forward to the Sky. You know what? I'll even do it in a storybook fashion. Okay. Once upon a time, a fearsome witch terrorized the populace of an unnamed civilization. The people rose up against the evil witch and exiled her from the town. In an effort to hide from the angry citizens, the witch hid herself atop a massive spire constructed entirely out of cube-shaped objects. However, her evil skeleton minions still found time to wander down the tower and harm the populace. So the princess of this unnamed, unseen town flies off on her hot air balloon to kill the witch once and for all. However, along the way, she learns the witch may not be the evil creature the people of the town have led her to believe. In the end, the princess discovers the girl thought to be a witch is actually a young girl under the control of sentient crystals who are angry at humanity for mining them mercilessly. Story time over. I know all this because the game loves to tell you, constantly. It tells you again.
Leave this tower. I don't want to hurt you.
You can't fool me! It's you who controls these monsters! It's you who make them attack me!
No, it's not me.
The legend says that you'll do anything to hoard the crystals. You hold people by your evil whim! I won't be fooled!
And again.
Princess,
Witch, was it you who hid the crystals here?
please don't hurt the crystals.
Don't hurt the crystals? What does that mean? The voice disappeared.
And again.
Witch has hidden. Witch, where are you hiding?
You can't go on. They will not welcome you.
They? Who are they? I came to this tower to find you, witch.
Me. For me.
Some of the quips these two share make no sense to me at times. While the witch talks to you constantly throughout the game, you never actually see her until you reach the top of the tower. So when the princess says things like,
The witch still hasn't shown herself. In that battle, she had many opportunities to sneak attack. But why?
had plenty of time for a sneak attack? How? I don't see her. She's not here. She's not
This must
present.
be one of her tricks.
By the time I reached this point,
Careful.
Please believe me. I've never hurt anyone.
Witch.
I just want to protect them, but
Could it be that something happened?
I wondered if anyone was actually surprised. Was there someone out here who reached this point in the game and went, oh my god, what? The witch is nice? Holy. So enough about the story. I'll tell you right now, it isn't the game's greatest strength. I've already given it far more attention than I intended. So perhaps the combat is the strength, right? I've owned this game for so long on Steam, I can't remember why I purchased it in the first place. Judging from the trailers and images on the store page, though, the combat seems like a likely culprit for the purchasing decision. I've been known to enjoy a character action game or two, but there's just one problem. This isn't a character action game. I mean, I suppose someone could argue it is. It does have a character, and it has action, kind of. But there's a large number of problems with the fighting in Forward to the Sky, and I'll just run through them in list fashion real quick. First, every sword swing feels like fighting in a pit of molasses. There are times you'll have an enemy directly in your sights, but he keeps smacking you out of your attack animation before you can land a swing. Second, some swings cause the princess to either lunge forward like crazy, or pause for long periods of time between swipes. Both are undesirable. Third, there's no lock-on function. Fighting in a 3D space without being able to center the camera on an enemy is something I've taken for granted ever since Ocarina of Time. It's one of those things that's become so standard to 3D action games I don't even notice it until it's gone. And finally, there are no defensive actions. There's no dodging, no rolling, no blocking, there's none of that. It's either take it or dish it out first. Despite all these issues, I never actually died in combat while playing Forward to the Sky, I just, didn't enjoy it. Good combat controls are the difference between, cool, enemies to fight, and fuck, enemies to fight.
Leave this tower. I don't
At this point in Forward to the Sky, I seriously contemplated abandoning it, searching instead for another game I have no memory of purchasing in my Steam library to fill this week's spot. Then something happened, something curiously fun. It ends up Forward to the Sky's greatest strength is puzzles. And not only the puzzles themselves, but the way the game teaches the player about the mechanics of each level. For example, in the first stage, the game has me navigate the world by moving around on these floating blocks. Then, after navigating a few simple puzzles with no danger, I find this block instead, where I now need to dodge spikes while it's in motion. This took a couple tries. But this was actually pretty cool. Forward to the Sky let me experience these blocks in a safe, controlled environment first, and then presented some interesting challenges to overcome later once I'd become accustomed to them. Also, there's a moment where I shoved a bunch of boxes into a pit. I don't know what's up with that. It never comes up again. It was kind of fun, though. Before I do a tour of all the stages and their respective puzzles, I want to get one more annoyance out of the way. The princess has only 2 move speeds, dead stop and full-on sprint. In a 3D platformer, this creates all sorts of problems. I fell countless times while trying to adjust my position on a given platform. Fortunately, the only punishment for falling is a short balloon ride. That aside, let's move on. Stage 2 is all about moving platforms and rotating propellers. Of all the stages, this one is probably the worst at teaching its mechanics. The stage starts with vertical propellers the player is required to dodge. Later, you're expected to ride these horizontal propellers. However, since I'd been taught at the start propeller bad, I made the incorrect assumption these would hurt me as well. They didn't. But these ones did. A lot. Stage 3 is the best yet. First, we walk past these glowing purple lights, which push the princess along, so now I know purple light shows me down the path. Then there's these rings, which will fly me to the next area. So, near the end of the stage, we get this great puzzle that combines everything so far. As I'm being pushed along by the purple mist, I have to dodge crystals, while also hitting switches which will activate the air circles below. This was actually a lot of fun. My biggest disappointment with this game is that these mechanics never returned. Stage 4 brings us a puzzle game staple, making lines of light hit different objects that will then reveal paths. Again, this was actually a fun stage, and it escalated in fun ways. We start with a simple light bridge, and then we move on to these self-rotating lights, where now my timing is being tested instead of my observation. And finally, we end with a whole complex system of crystals that reveals a ruined city of bridges and cubes. It's no Stage 3, but it's still engaging and unique. Stage 5 starts with some simple lasers to dodge along the floor. Then we move on to enemies. Anyway, then we move on to dodging floor lasers while also navigating floating platforms. There's also boulders to dodge in this stage, sometimes, not often. But later, there's also a series of puzzles to solve that involve riding these boulders. In a clever bit of tutorializing, the game sticks a little skeleton guy on top of the first rideable boulder you see, alerting the player that these particular rocks are safe to jump on. This stage is also the only time I got stuck on a puzzle. See, there's this room with 2 boulders and a laser grid with a series of rising platforms. So I figured the solution must be to get one of these boulders up to the top, and then use the other to bridge the gap here. In an effort to do this, I ended up trapping myself in the laser grid, stuck for an eternity in the prison of deadly walls. I restarted the stage and continued trying to get both boulders on the same side of the grid. I mean, it's the only possible solution, right? Well, no. It ends up I'm a dumbass. Ends up the puzzle requires just using one boulder to get to the top, where another boulder is already waiting. Way easier than whatever I was doing. And now we're at stage 6, the end of the game. First some pillars fly at us, then we fight the witch, which is actually kind of fun. The boss fight feels more like solving a puzzle than an actual fight, which is good. It leans on the game's strengths. First we do a little platforming to smack some crystals, then we get to run up her giant crystal arm and smack around a bit. And, well, that's it. The game's over. Now we get to see the whole story. Now, remember earlier when I said I assumed the story must fill out after stages? I was half right. You may have noticed in all the gameplay footage there's a bunch of crystals flying around the stage from time to time, usually when I kill enemies or whack a statue. How much of the story you get to see at this point is based on how many of those crystals you picked up in each stage. Get too few, and you get nothing. Hey, guess which one of these chapters is the boulder stage? It's that one. Forward to the Sky isn't the disaster I initially anticipated. Just as I started to lose interest, the game hooked me again with its curiously well-crafted puzzle solving. In the end, my biggest problem with Forward to the Sky isn't even the lackluster combat or the flimsy narrative. I've seen and played worse examples of both. No, my biggest issue is the incredibly short length.
Where are the skeletons coming from?
The whole premise of Good Morning Alan is to start a game blind and describe my opening experiences, and instead I accidentally beat Forward to the Sky while recording footage. I would have loved to have seen some of these puzzle-solving mechanics from previous stages return for one last hurrah, even just for one more stage where we get one last challenge that uses everything we've seen so far. The wind tunnels, the propellers, the boulders, the spinning lasers. It would have been a great capstone to close out the experience, but instead we got a 3-minute boss fight and some crystals. But to be fair, Forward to the Sky is definitely a budget title. I purchased it on a sale for $5, so I think the question at the end isn't so much, is this a great game, but is $5 worth roughly an hour of clever puzzles? And for me, I think it was. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next week with something new.